Who takes the lead in summer luxury? In summer luxury, the grasshopper takes the lead. A voice will run. Whose voice is referred to here? The grasshopper's voice is referred to here. Who has never done with his delights? The grasshopper has never done with his delights. Where do all the birds hide in Keats' The Poetry of Earth? In the poetry of earth, all the birds are hid in a cooling tree. From where is the shrill song of the cricket heard in the poetry of earth? In the poetry of earth, from the stove, the shrill song of the cricket heard. Where does the grasshopper rest? The grasshopper rests beneath some pleasant wheat. What shall death not break in Shakespeare's sonnet number 18? In Shakespeare's sonnet number 18, death will never break up its omnipotence over his friend. What will make the beauty of the poet's friend eternal? The verses written by the poet will make the beauty of the poet's friend eternal. How is the gold complexion of the sun dimmed? The gold complexion of the sun is dimmed by the clouds. And summer's leech had all too short a date. What is meant by summer leech? The phrase summer's leech means a very short period of time granted for the summer season. What does the eye of heaven refer to? The sun refers to as the eye of heaven. So long live this. What is referred to by the word this? The word this referred to the sonnet. What gives life to the poet's friend in Shakespeare's sonnet number 18? The verses written by the poet gives life to the poet's friend in Shakespeare's sonnet number 18. Where are the feet of the soldier? The feet of the soldier are among the flowers on the valley. What do the two red holes in the poem Asleep in the Valley signify? In the poem Asleep in the Valley, the two red holes means the young soldiers had received two bullet injuries. Why does the poet ask nature to keep the soldier? The poet asks nature to keep the soldier warm because he may catch cold. Where does the stream leave long strands of silver? The slow stream leaves long strands of silver in a small green valley. What is described as gentle without guile? The young soldier's smile is described as gentle without guile. How does the poet bring out the innocence of the soldiers in Asleep in the Valley? The poet brings out the innocence of the soldier by describing the soldier's smile, which is like an infant's, gentle without guile. Not so much pain will do it. What task does the word it refers to? Here the word it refers to the killing of a tree. What, according to Gibb Patel, is the most sensitive part of a tree? According to Gibb Patel, the root is the most sensitive part of a tree. What does the phrase earth cap refers to? The phrase earth cap refers to the hollow portion in the soil due to the taking out of the root of the tree. What scorch and choke the tree after it is pulled out? Sunlight and air scorch and choke the tree respectively after it is pulled out. How does a tree grow? As pointed out by Gibb Patel in his poem on killing a tree grows slowly by consuming the nutrients from the earth and observing সানলাইট এয়ার অ্যান্ড ওয়াটার ফর ইয়ার্স। তোমরা শুধু এইখান থেকে লিখতে পারো, এ ট্রি গ্রোজ স্লোলি থেকে এইখান থেকে লিখতে পারো। ফ্রম হোয়ার উড দ্য কাল্ড গ্রিন টুইক্স রাইজ? দ্য কাল্ড গ্রিন টুইক্স রাইজ ফ্রম ক্লোজ টু দ্য গ্রাউন্ড। Which part of the tree is the most sensitive, white and wet? The most sensitive, white and wet part of the tree is the root. What? According to the narrator of the Ruskin Bond story, the eyes have it is the best time to visit the hills. According to the narrator of Ruskin Bond story, the eyes have it October is the best time to visit the hills. Who broke into the narrator's reverie? The man who had entered the train compartment at Saharanpur broke into the narrator's reverie. How did the girl describe the narrator? The girl described that the narrator was a very gallant young man, but he was very serious. What remark did the narrator make about people with good eyesight? In the short story, The Eyes Have It, the narrator remarked that it often happens that people with good eyesight fail to see what is right in front of them. এটা in front একটাই শব্দ. Who did the narrator of The Eyes Have It think to be formidable creatures? In The Eyes Have It, the narrator thought that ants are usually formidable creatures. Where was the girl in the story The Eyes Have It getting off? In the story The Eyes Have It, the blind girl was getting off at Saharanpur. আর get in হলে রোহানা হতো. What was the hermit doing when the jar came to visit him? When the jar came to visit the hermit, he was digging the ground in front of his hut. Where did the jar fall asleep? The jar fell asleep on the threshold of the hermit's hut. Why did the man want to take revenge? The bearded man wanted to take revenge because once the jar had killed his brother and seized his property. Whom did the hermit receive? The hermit received only common folk. Where did the hermit in where did the hermit live in where did the hermit in 3 question live? In the story 3 question, the hermit lived in a wood. Which part of the body of the bearded man was injured? In the story 3 question, the part of the body of the bearded man that was injured was stomach. What, according to the hermit, is the most important thing to do? The hermit suggested that the most important thing to do good for the people who are around us, but with whom you are. What did the wounded man promise the jar? The wounded man promised him that if the jar allows him and if he lives, then he would serve the jar as his most faithful slave and would beat his sons to do the same. What was the second question of the jar? The second question of the jar was who were the right people to listen to and whom to avoid. How did the jar meet the hermit? The jar put on simple clothes and dismounted from his horse, leaving his bodyguard behind, went on alone. Why did Roger want to snatch the purse of Mrs. Jones? Roger tried to snatch the large purse of Mrs. Jones because he wanted to buy a pair of blue suede shoes. What were there behind the screen in Mrs. Jones' room? There was a mini kitchen with a gas plate and an ice box behind the screen. Where did Mrs. Jones work? Mrs. Jones worked in a hotel beauty shop. Where did Roger fall on losing his balance? Roger fell on his back on the sidewalk after losing his balance. What was the full name of Mrs. Jones? The full name of Mrs. Jones was Mrs. Loyola Bates Washington Jones. According to Mrs. Jones, how old was the boy? According to Mrs. Jones, the boy was 14 or 15 years old. What advice did Mrs. Jones give to Roger at the end of the story? Mrs. Jones advised Roger not to make the mistake of snatching anyone's pocketbook and behave himself from there and then on. What did Mrs. Jones ask the boy to pick up? Mrs. Jones Mrs. Loyola Bates Jones asked the boy to pick up her pocketbook. When and where did Roger and Mrs. Jones meet? Roger and Mrs. Loyola Bates Washington Jones met at about 11 o'clock at night on the road. What shows in whom did Abdul Kalam's father have an ideal helpmate? Abdul Kalam's father had an ideal helpmate in Asiyama, Kalam's mother. Who was the high priest of Rameswaram temple? Poxi Lakshman Shastri was the high priest of Rameswaram temple. What, according to Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam's father, does adversity presents? According to Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam's father, adversity always presents the opportunities for introspection. In which town was Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam born? Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam was born into a island town of Rameswaram. Who was bestowed the title of Bahadur in Strong Roots? In the autobiographical essay Strong Roots, one of Kalam's mother's forebears was bestowed the title of Bahadur by the British. Describe the ancestral house of Kalam's. Kalam's ancestral house was built in the middle of the 19th century. It was a fairly large pakka house made of limestone and brick on the Mock Street in Rameswaram. What does Kalam's father say about the relevance of prayer? Kalam's father says about the relevance of prayer is that there was nothing mysterious about prayer. Rather, prayer made possible a communion of the spirit between people. Whom did Kalam consider to be a very close friend of his father? Kalam considered Poxi Lakshman Shastri to be a very close friend of his father. What did Abdul Kalam's father used to avoid? Kalam's father used to avoid all inessential comforts and luxury.